Hi, my name is Haris Jalani, and this is my second project for English 1102. In this project, I will go over the physical impacts of the 1996 Olympics on Georgia Tech and the surrounding Atlanta community, and show multiple artifacts which are visual representations of these impacts. So first, an intro to the 1996 Olympics. The 1996 Summer Olympics was one of the most influential events in Atlanta's history. It was the 100th anniversary of the modern Olympic Games, as well as the last Olympic Games of the millennia, so it was one of the most anticipated global events in years. Athens in Greece was heavily favored to win the bid to host the Games, but with the help of Georgia Tech, Atlanta managed to win. This led to the city being put into a global spotlight, which it was not used to in the years before. In the years building up to the 96 Olympics, there were many changes made to Midtown Atlanta, Georgia Tech, and the city of Atlanta as a whole, in anticipation of the large number of incoming visitors and global attention. This project will document the most major of these physical changes, showing the tangible impacts the 1996 Games had on the Atlanta community. Our major areas of focus for this project are Atlanta before and after the Games, the renovations and changes to Midtown resulting from the Olympics, and the changes to Georgia Tech's campus resulting from the Olympics. To the right, you can see an image of Midtown in the mid-20th century, as well as a modern-day image. You can see that there are many differences between these two pictures, and many of these differences can be derived from the years before and after the 96 Olympics. Here we can see the Dublin core information for the header, the Olympic torch image, and the comparison image. Much of this information came from the GT archives, which are a trove of information about Atlanta and Georgia Tech as a whole. Here is a button that can take you to the archives. So first, let's take a look at Atlanta before and after the Games. Prior to the 1996 Olympics, Atlanta was a very different city from the one that it is today. Midtown Atlanta had certainly seen better days, and while some parts of the city did have money and jobs coming in, Midtown suffered in squalor. The city as a whole did not have the global spotlight that it currently has today. Midtown's decline can be attributed to failed housing projects, neglected public areas, and a lack of funding. Drugs and crime ran rampant through many neighborhoods, and the nearby proximity of the Georgia Institute of Technology did little to alleviate these problems. Faculty and students usually avoided the poorer and more decrepit areas. However, in the late 1980s, as the city's growth continued, new attention fell to the region and efforts were made to improve it. The construction of the One Atlantic Center triggered a series of large-scale constructions, and many new businesses and developments came to the area. However, this had the effect of creating a large disparity between the original residents from when the area was poorer and the new occupants who lived in the new developments. With the selection of Atlanta to host the 1996 Olympic Games, this disparity widened. Because Midtown was so close to many of the Olympic events, efforts were created to clean it up, with many of the housing projects being demolished and their members displaced. Today, Midtown Atlanta is one of the most vibrant and bustling regions of the city, with cultural and art institutions, businesses, and schools. A lot of the Olympic venues which were created for use for the Games are still in use today, as sports facilities, housing areas, and more. While the execution was definitely not perfect, Atlanta did do a much better job than other cities which have hosted the Olympics in maintaining and capitalizing on the physical impacts of the Games. This project focuses on two aspects of these physical changes, those which happened in Midtown Atlanta and those on Georgia Tech's campus. And for each specific change, I have tied together the state of the area before and after the Games, highlighting similarities and differences while emphasizing the scale of the impact. Let's start with Techwood Homes, which was the first public housing complex in the nation and occupied a large portion of Midtown Atlanta prior to the Games. It was set up by the city of Atlanta to replace the tenured bottom slum. It was completed in 1936, and the president at the time, FDR, spoke at its dedication. While it did initially only contain white residents, it was desegregated in 1968, and within 6 years of integration, the population of African Americans had skyrocketed to 50%. While it was initially meant to replace the slums of the area and provide affordable housing to the residents, a combination of white flight, neglect from the city, and racially motivated politics due to its growing African American population led to its reversion to an extremely poor area. Ideas for its demolition had been floated since the 1970s, but it was not until right before the Olympics in the early 1990s that it was actually destroyed. Because it was so close to many of the events and locations central to the Games, the project was demolished and replaced with Centennial Place. Nowadays, where the homes used to be, there are dorms for Georgia Tech, an elementary school, and commercial buildings. This was a very controversial decision because a lot of people saw it as gentrification and racially motivated. However, others argued that it helped reduce crime and made the Olympics safer. Here we can see a comparison between the old Techwood Homes housing complex on the right and the current homes on the left. There's immediate differences that we can see. The Centennial Place buildings on the left seem much better maintained and the area looks a lot nicer, and they do not have the chain link and barbed wire present on the right. These comparisons persist throughout both of the complexes, with Centennial Place overall being much more well renovated and having better upkeep. This image is historically significant because it highlights a specific area of comparison between the old and new buildings, which is overall representative of a major change of the 1996 Olympics. Many of the physical impacts of the games are not as flashy as the construction of a massive stadium or a new aquatic center. Instead, they were large-scale renovations to existing areas to improve them prior to the games. Thus, this image is representative of a large, sweeping change in the city, which occurred in the lead-up to the Olympics. Here's the Dublin core information for this image. Another change which occurred in Midtown Atlanta was the construction of the Centennial Olympic Stadium. This was the crowning jewel of Atlanta's contribution to the 1996 Olympics, and perhaps the most iconic construction related to the Games. The opening and closing ceremonies, as well as multiple events, were hosted here. Construction began in 1993, and it was completed right before the opening ceremony. Unlike many other Olympic stadiums, which often sit unused and become decrepit after the Games, this stadium was specifically constructed with another use in mind. After the Games, it was converted to a baseball stadium for the Atlanta Braves to use as their home stadium until 2016. To the left is an artistic rendering of the Centennial Olympic Stadium found in the Georgia Tech archive. While this image is undated, we know it came from a presentation that was given between 1994 and 1996. We can see differences between the completed stadium and this rendering, so we can estimate it is from earlier in the building process. However, despite these differences, we can see the massive physical impact of the stadium, and this is where the historical significance of this image lies. We can see the unique architectural style and how much the stadium dominates the surrounding area, immediately catching the eye with its unique style and size. To the right, we can see Turner Field, which is the home stadium for the Atlanta Braves from 1996 to 2016. Immediately after the Olympics, Centennial Olympic Stadium was converted to a baseball stadium. In fact, it was actually built with this very purpose in mind. Because of this, the physical impacts of the stadium went far beyond simply being a construction in the city. Instead, it transformed the area around it with new businesses and transportation hubs. This image is relevant as it shows the immediate and continued physical impact of the Centennial Olympic Stadium. Now, the stadium has become Center Park Stadium, which is currently under renovation to become a football stadium. Here we can see the Dublin core information for these two images. Now, we move on to changes which affected Georgia Tech. Firstly, we have Kessler Campanile Plaza. The Kessler Campanile is one of the most iconic constructions related to Georgia Tech, and in fact appears in the university's logo. It consists of 244 stainless steel plates which are rotated to create a spinning pattern. It pierces the GT skyline as an 80-foot tall obelisk. Surrounding the obelisk is a seating area and fountain, which students often use to relax and socialize. The area as a whole is known as Kessler Campanile Plaza. The first idea for the Campanile came in 1991 when Richard Hill approached a design firm utilizing computers called Architectural Support Services, Inc. Together, Hill, the company, and other students created the artifact. To the left, we can see a rendering from the Georgia Tech archive of the Kessler Campanile Plaza, taken from the briefing slides about the project in September 1995. Although this image is simply an artist's rendering, it is very similar to the current rendition of the plaza, although the student center behind it has changed significantly since then. This picture holds high historical significance as it is a visual representation of a stage of the design process which went into creating one of the most unique physical impacts of the '96 Olympics on Georgia Tech's campus. To the right is a snapshot from the Georgia Tech archive of Kessler Campanile Plaza in May 1996, which is very close to the time of the Summer Olympics. Although the angle is different, we can see how similar it is to the above drawing, with the campanile itself dominating the plaza and surrounded by a pool, circular walkway, and student seating. So, this image is important because it is a snapshot of a physical change on campus resulting from the Games, which in fact lasts until today. This entire plaza structure did not exist before the Games, and so everything in this image is indirectly a physical impact of the Olympics. Contrasting it with the above image, as well as the modern Kessler Campanile Plaza, one that is out of construction, we can see the evolution of the area from its design, construction, and now through its renovation. Here's the Dublin core information for these two images. Next, we have perhaps the greatest impact on Georgia Tech's campus from the Olympic Games, the Macaulay Aquatic Center. With the wide variety of different sports represented in the Olympics, many venues were needed for the competition. Alongside hosting the athletes, Georgia Tech was also chosen to host the water sports competition, such as swimming, water polo, and diving. The current aquatic center at the university was unfit for this role. It was already almost 20 years old, and there were few changes or renovations made over that time. There had already been plans to build a new one, but with the Olympics coming to town, these plans were accelerated. In 1994, construction officially began on the aquatic center, then called the SAC, and it was completed in time for the 96 Games. Today, the Macaulay Aquatic Center stands largely unchanged and hosts many athletic competitions every year. It is nationally renowned and in fact placed first in the 2016 College Ranker list of the 10 best collegiate competition swimming pools. To the right, a physical model of the Macaulay Aquatic Center from its construction briefing, which is found in the Georgia Tech archive. This model is undated, but given that it was made before construction began and shows a relatively final version of the building, we can estimate it from late 1993 to early 1994. We can see a lot of similarities between the campus in the early 1990s to now. Although the aquatic center looks very similar, the area around it is definitely very different, the most notable difference being the absence of the massive CRC building which is currently there. This model is important because it shows the large scale and physical impact that the construction of the aquatic center had. We can see how it dominates the area and completely changed the layout of campus around it. To the left, we see a building map of the Macaulay Aquatic Center and the surrounding area from the same construction briefing in the Georgia Tech archive. On the right side of the map, we can see some of the buildings which made up the current Student Aquatic Center, such as the temporary water polo building. Right now, these buildings have been replaced with Stamps Field. We can date this map from late 1993 to early 1994, but there is no specific date given. This map is important for similar reasons to the model. By studying this map and comparing it to a current one, we can see some of the impacts of the Olympics on campus, as well as changes which have happened in the past few decades. This allows us to see the physical evolution of this area of campus. Here we can see the Dublin core information for these two images. The final change of the Georgia Tech campus that we're documenting is the new housing added to campus. With the influx of thousands of athletes to the Olympic Village, Georgia Tech needed a place to house all of these people alongside its student body. So, a series of apartment-style residences were built in the years leading up to the Olympics. Because of this, after housing the athletes, they were turned into student housing areas, which allowed student housing capacity to nearly double, and the size of the university greatly grew. To the left, we have a photograph of construction on the Olympic Village taken from the Georgia Tech archive. This image was taken in 1995, right before construction completed, and shows construction on Cressine Residence Hall. We can see the significance of this photo because most of the buildings are still in use today and are largely unchanged, thus showing a continuation of a building from the Olympics to now. Combined with the image below, we can see the evolution of Olympic Village housing, starting from their construction, continuing through the Olympics, and finally to their current usage today. This is an exemplary case of how Atlanta continues to effectively use the constructions resulting from the Olympics. To the right, we see an image of a few buildings from the Olympic Village after their completion, taken in summer 1996 just before the Games. These buildings are currently used as the North Avenue apartments and look almost exactly the same. We can see the relevance of this image because it shows the low level of change required to integrate Olympic housing into the current Georgia Tech community, which is representative of the overall low level of effort that was taken to integrate Olympic buildings into the modern Atlanta community. Many buildings were directly converted from their Olympic role to their modern usage, minimizing waste and extra cost. Here we can see the Dublin core information for these two images. In conclusion, we can see there were many lasting changes which came from the 1996 Olympics, specifically in terms of physical impacts. They changed Georgia Tech and Midtown in many ways. Most viewed the 1996 Olympics as a huge success for the city of Atlanta. It became a large member of the global spotlight and saw large improvements due to the Games. However, there were also some concerns, especially about the less fortunate denizens of the cities. Some efforts were made to relocate them, but not all were able to take advantage of them, and many lost their homes. Georgia Tech's integral role in helping the city land the Olympics, as well as its housing of the athletes and being the site of many of the competitions, also increased the university's prestige and gave it a larger global presence. Some aspects of the Games, such as the Olympic Village and Kessler Campanile, were permanently integrated into parts of the school. The physical impacts of the Games cannot be overstated, as well as the overall influence of hosting the 1996 Summer Olympics on the city of Atlanta. The city and campus would not be the same today without the Games. Overall, they were one of the most defining and influential events in the history of Atlanta and Georgia Tech. Here you can see the references for the various images and sites used to collect this information.